Here I am, climbing up, feeling great, getting love. Here I go, risk it all, be worth it now, and that's for sure. Watch me as I Rocketeer.
All right, episode 25 of Fight Talk Down Under is brought to you by CMBT. Go to cmbt.com.au for all your protein powders, protein bars, pre-workout, all that good stuff. CMBT Nutrition, go to cmbt.com.au. Free shipping for all orders over $150. We're also brought to you by Nutcare. Now, we've been talking about Nutcare hair removal cream every week. That's, of course, just a part of the range from the guys at Nutcare. So go to nutcare.com.au, check out their nut dust, smooth nuts, sugar nuts, cool nuts, comfy nuts, anything that you or your nuts could desire. So go to nutcare.com.au, use the promo code FIGHTNEWS for 10% off at the checkout. nutcare.com.au, promo code FIGHTNEWS. Now, of course, I'm Dan Meehan from Fight News Australia, and I talked a lot of shit just not 2 weeks ago about it being a superior specimen and being immune to COVID and all this sort of stuff, and now, unfortunately, I have COVID. So, I just wanted to say on record, COVID, I'm sorry. Don't fuck me up too bad. All right, it's only early days, so yeah, COVID, I'm sorry. But also, I'm joined here today by my regular co-host, of course. Lockjaw Justin Van Heerden. How are you, mate?
Good, excited. It's our 25th episode. Like we spoke about earlier today, it's over a day's worth of Fight Talk Down Under content. So we must be doing all right.
Absolutely. And, like you mentioned there, it's an entire day of somebody's life. If you listen to every episode, that's an entire day of your life, dedicated to listening to us waffling on. So, fair play to you. But, I've decided to bring in a third party this week to carry the burden. I've been listening to Lockjaw now for 24 hours of my life. And, who better than a man who's used to being a third wheel when Lockjaw's in full flight? It's, of course, I speak of one of the best referees in the game, Mr. Tomas Churchill. How are you, mate?
Thank you. Yeah, good. You're too kind.
No worries at all. Thanks for coming on. This is this should be a fun one. Should be able to cover off a fair bit of fair bit of interesting stuff.
Yeah, it should be good.
Absolutely. Well, like I mentioned off the top there, you've sort of refereed most of Lockjaw's fights from what I've been told. So, you guys have got a bit of a rapport, I imagine, at this stage. So, what's it like? What's it like being in there with Lockjaw and when he's in full flight?
Yeah. Oh, look, without trying to upset the man too much, you don't really take too much notice of the actual people that are in there. You're sort of in there and you're just watching what's going on and worrying about where you are and what the opponent and what everyone's doing and making sure that everyone's doing what they're supposed to do and making sure you're in the right position, obviously, to make sure the fight's going the way it's supposed to.
Absolutely.
So he's a bit of a pain in the ass backstage though. Like he always winds me up backstage beforehand. So
Always have dumb questions. Always just got to get Thomas to explain the rules to me again. Show me what ground it is, what's not grounded.
Yeah, I am pretty glad that you're down there with Joe though now, because when I walk in there, Joe just says, "No, we ain't got no questions." He just gets me to practice raising an arm. That's all he ever does now. So just whether it's left arm, right arm, I just gotta raise the winner's arm. That's all he asks me to practice these days.
That's it. That's all we got to do.
There you go. And it's kind of a bit of a tight-knit community, really, isn't it? Like the local MMA scene. Like, it's kind of interesting to hear that there's like sort of banter backstage between like officials and fighters and that sort of thing. So, what's it like? What's it like back there, being sort of among all the fighters and everything?
Oh, look, most of the time it's really, really relaxed. It's really calm. You don't get too many people that get wound up. It is a pretty high pressure environment for the guys that are getting ready to compete, whether it's their first amateur bout or whether they're, I think I saw something there earlier today where it was, Justin's about to hit his 15th or just hit his 15th or something pro fight. So it's a pretty high pressure environment for those guys. So I try not to involve myself too much in what's going on. You just sort of have a quick chat, make sure that they're cool with the rules, talk to the coaches more so than what I do the fighters themselves. But most of the time people are pretty cruisy, pretty relaxed, happy to have a bit of banter, happy to have a bit of a joke, that sort of thing. And yeah, just keen to get in there and get on with it, basically.
Absolutely. And what do you actually go through backstage when you're sort of talking to the coaches, talking to the fighters, and that sort of thing? We hear, at almost every fight they say, we've talked about the rules in the dressing room, all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What actually gets spoken about?
Well, we usually do a rules meeting together. I think certain promotions will run a rules meeting at the weigh-ins, and they'll also send the athletes off the rules that they've got to sign as part of their contract. So most people are pretty up to date with it. The amateur events I'll go through a little bit more closely, particularly if you've got first-time fighters, inexperienced fighters, things like that. You'll go through the rules, the basic rules in a group environment, and then I try and go around individually to the fighters that I'm going to be refereeing and just sort of say, make sure that their understanding of what a grounded opponent is, make sure their understanding of what, shots to the back of the head, make sure they're understanding what commands I'm going to give them in there, what they might hear from me, what they might be asked to do, things like that, just so that they've got a little bit of a brief, I suppose, as to what they could have happen and how they need to react to it, or what I'm looking for if I am saying something to them. So the pros, you really don't have to say too much to the pros. You sort of, I think most of my conversation to the pros, I walk in there, I shake their hand, I tell them I'm reffing their fight, I ask them if they've got any questions, if the coach has got any questions, and usually it's a 20 or a 30-second conversation and we're done. There's very rarely a time that any of the pros have got questions. So
there you go. And you ever on the sort of receiving end of any sort of sort of criticism backstage or anything like that? Do sort of teams ever get sort of upset about decisions and things like that?
I critique his shoes straight off the bat when I see him. His shoes. That's my first thing. I'm always on the shoes.
Yeah, well, I had to retire the Jordans. I think they fell apart a couple probably about 12 months ago now. The actual sole of the Jordans fell completely off. So I still had one fight to ref and I had to sticky tape them up. They got the old war tape out and sticky taped them back together for one last fight. So, but yeah, backstage, no, look, yes and no. You will have people question or ask you the question or things like that. And yeah, depending on my position on the day, like if I've refereed the fight, if someone asks me about a decision, like a judge's decision in a fight that I've refereed, I'd never judge a fight when I'm reffing it. It's too much. You can't be expected to be thinking about that at the same time. So I'll happily talk to them and things like that. You don't get a lot of really over the top aggressiveness sort of stuff. Like if someone, there's a few people out there that, if they lose, if they come out on the wrong end of the decision, whatever the case might be, they're going to be upset. They're going to be frustrated. They're not going to want to talk to you. They're not going to want to talk to the doctor. They just want to get backstage, get the gloves off, decompress, and then deal with it after that. I think in the time that I've been doing it, maybe once I've had a really bad sort of experience back of house where someone's come out on the wrong side of a decision, and they were pretty wound up about it. And that took probably, I was actually the lead official on that night. So that took probably about an hour of my time after the event had finished, and, a bit of conversations and stuff like that to try and calm everybody down. But it is what it is.
There you go. And do you take on sort of multiple roles in addition to being a referee, or are you sort of purely a referee these days?
I do a bit of everything. I'll judge, I'll timekeep, I'll work back of house if I need to, signing off wraps, doing gloves, whatever's needed on the night. One of the things that I've had some, friends and family and stuff like that have come along to certain fight shows and things like that with me from time to time. And the one comment that you hear quite often is, you guys don't sit still. Like we turn up and that's it. Like whoever we've whoever we've taken along for us, they're basically ignored for the rest of the night because we're running around. We could be signing off gloves. We could be out the back talking about rules. We could be in there ref and judge and timekeeping. And you can't. You don't have the opportunity to sort of not be doing anything. The scene in Australia is not to a point where promoters can have one person doing this job and that's all they do. One person three people refereeing and that's all they do for the night. One person's the timekeeper for the entire night. Three people are the judge there's not enough ability to do that. So you sort of mix and match a bit on the night.
So when was sort of like, I guess, the first sort of event that you jumped on and got to ref before, like when you did your first sort of, where you refed your first fight?
When I refed my first fight?
Yeah.
So I've been doing this I've been officiating or been involved with officials for about 10 or 11 years now. And for the first 2 years I spent doing back of house, hand wraps, gloves, making sure everything was running, making sure everyone was ready when they were supposed to be ready, and timekeeping. I did that for 2 years before I was even allowed to judge a fight. The first fight I refed, and I remember it pretty well actually. My old coach and my referee's boss, Peter Hickmott, we were driving to the sunny coast for a Warriors Realm. And we got about halfway there. So where I live, Sunshine Coast is about 3 hours from me. We got about an hour and a half into the drive, and Pete looks at me and he says, "Oh, by the way, you're reffing Ty, one of my teammates at the time. You got to ref his fight tonight because the other referee can't come. He's sick." There was 18 fights on the night. And he said, "Well, you're either reffing or you got a coach, you got a corner." And I went, "Okay, well, I guess I'm reffing." So people won't let me corner him, so I guess I'm reffing. So when we got there and we had a chat to the other team, and the other team were quite accommodating and quite happy to do what it was. But I turned up there. I had my steel cap boots on. I was not expecting to be in there refereeing, and that was the first fight I did ref. Yeah, so.
There you go. And sort of just on a side note there, you mentioned Warriors Realm. As reported on Fight News Australia during the week, the promoter from Warriors Realm, Shane Barmer, passed away, I think during the week, or last week. So, yeah, so that was just some sad news there. So yeah, RIP to Shane, and condolences with his families. But did Absolutely. You know Shane? Did you sort of come across him too many times?
No, I only got to talk to Shane probably 2 or 3 times, and that was just in the couple of Warriors Realms. Because at that stage, he'd done the underground MMA series, which was like an amateur series, going around all to the sort of rural towns, like Lismore, Toowoomba. I think he had one out at a mining town. I can't think of the name of this mining town now, but yeah, he'd sort of done the underground MMA stuff, and I'd met him through Peter there as well, at one of the shows here in Toowoomba, and then I'd spoken to him a little bit at that Warriors Realm. But that was the night I think he proposed in the cage that night, from memory. But yeah, it was a long time ago. I might have had a few head knocks as well. So, but But yeah, no, I didn't have a lot to do with Shane. The few interactions that I did have with him were always, very cordial and very professional. He seemed like a really nice guy. But yeah, it's just obviously condolences to the family. And if anybody's out there struggling or anything like that, reach out and get some help.
Absolutely, yeah, it's an important message as well. I think Lockjaw might have posted something like that on Insta recently as well. It's it's something that is important. So yeah, like Thomas said, reach out. Doesn't matter who or where. Just don't carry your burdens alone.
Definitely.
But I guess Like we we're talking about sort of your sort of beginnings in refereeing there, we know that, and we've kind of spoken about this off air a little bit, like, sort of MMA, it's a pretty, there's not a whole lot of money in MMA at the sort of grassroots level, or, it's something that you really have to love to get into. And, whether it's as a fighter or an official, or even in the media, there's a lot of sort of unpaid work. There's a lot of grinding that sort of has to go into it to to get to a level where you do sort of start to reach a decent level, or make some money, or whatever it is that you're striving for. So can you tell us a little bit about sort of I guess the process to becoming an official and a referee, and sort of how you found your way to where you are now?
Yeah, so my pathway was a little bit different to what it is now. Obviously, there's a little bit more structure now in the pathways to get involved and things like that. My particular one, as I said, Pete was my coach, and I sort of stumbled into MMA. I didn't really, I'd never really, I worked with Pete from, I think it was about 2004. I started working with Peter, and I knew he did MMA at that stage. I knew he was competing and coaching and stuff like that, and I didn't really have a whole lot of interest in it and things like that. And one day he convinced me to come down and basically try a kickboxing class, because I was getting a little bit fat, and it sort of grew from there. So and then as time went on, training and stuff like that, he pulled me aside one day and he said, "Are you ever thinking about competing?" And I went, "No, honestly, I'm not." Even at that stage, like I'm 43 now, so I was just in my early 30s when I'd started. Mortgage to the hilt, one kid on the scene, pretty good job. Didn't really want to have to worry about black eyes and broken bits when I was turning up to work and stuff like that. So I said, "No, not really." And he suggested coming along and sort of getting involved. So at that stage, it was basically, and he said to me, I can't promise you'll get paid for anything, but it's good fun." And so I went along, and I was pretty lucky in the sense that I got involved with the people that I did, and especially when we traveled together up and down to the shows, because I could pick his brains the whole way up and the whole way back. I'm sure there was times he wanted to throw me out of the freaking car on the way home. I would not shut up, and no matter how much he turned the music up, I kept asking questions and kept trying to seek that knowledge out and find out what was going on and why this happened and why that happened, and that was pretty much my education with it. Nowadays, there's opportunities there for people to get involved. I was just actually I messaged Peter this morning, because he's the guy that does all the referee training and judge training and stuff like that as well. And there's a couple of different ways that you can get involved. So the easiest, if you do want to get involved, you can hit up, if you're affiliated with a promotion. So if you've got a friend that runs a promotion, or you know somebody that runs a fight show, they can put you in touch with Pete, or they can nominate you in that regards, or you can go down the IMAF pathway as well. So International Mixed Martial Arts Federation of Australia. You can go to the Facebook page there, shoot a message off onto that, and there is they're trying to get some courses up towards the end of the year or early next year for people to go along and be a part of. They'll separate it into judging with a full, there's a full training criteria that, has come from IMAF International as well. So, it's got people like Mark Goddard involved in creating this criteria and the process and stuff like that. So it's usually a 2-day workshop from memory, and it can be pretty involved, but if you want to get involved, that's the best way to do it. And yeah, just be prepared. There is a couple of times where I've run little workshop type seminars in places like Tassie and up north and things like that, and usually the questions that I'll get asked is, how much do you get paid for this kind of thing? And they're the people I say, mate, this ain't for you. If you're asking how much you're going to get paid to be an MMA referee in Australia, it ain't for you. So it's the same as everything. I mean, my eldest daughter, she referees. She's pretty involved with refereeing basketball and things like that. And I mean, she might get $10 or $15 a game to referee. You don't do it for that. You do it because you enjoy the sport and you want to be involved in the sport. But that's the pathway to do it. Is talk to your local promotion, message IMAF, the IMAF Australia page, and get involved, because we'd love to have you on board.
There you go. And you need a bit of a training or sort of competition background to kind of get involved in something like that.
No, not necessarily. No, there is. You have to understand what's going on. Obviously, you'd want to be able to be trained. You'd want to have training. You'd want to be able to know what you're looking at, and the only way to know that is obviously to have trained and be involved in it. Like, I mean, you want to know what it sounds like when someone's about to choke and be choked unconscious because you've been in that position, or you've heard that position, or you've put someone in that position, or things like that. But you don't necessarily have to have competed. So I personally have never competed, and I think that's why. Well, that is why it took me more than 2 years to be able to referee a fight, because even after that first 2 years, yes, I did have to referee one of my own teammates because it was a little bit less people available to do stuff around that at that point in time. But after that, it was another 12 months before I actually got to referee consistently, and that was on like the aftershocks and the lockdowns, which is like for those who don't know, the lockdown submission competition. Submission grappling is you take the strikes out of MMA. It's a grappling competition in a cage, scored the same way as MMA and things like that. It's a really good competition for referees to get involved with and get a lot of cage time. So, but you don't need to have competed before. I know that's not going to rub everybody the right way, but I think there's proof. Well, we've got within MMAA, the organisation that I operate within. There's a number of examples of people who haven't competed before and have been quite recognised as quality referees. So.
There you go. So you don't feel like it should be a prerequisite, because that's something that just gets put forward a lot, that like judges should be former fighters and all that sort of thing. It's even been asked on this podcast before whether officials should have a fighting background. Do you think it should be a prerequisite, or do you think it's it's fine as long as they're screened properly?
And it's not even a case of screening. I think I don't think you have to have it. You have to have experience in the sport. You can't come in off the street. You can't come in off the street as someone who's watched 100 UFCs and think that you know what you're doing, because 9 times out of 10 you don't. But you don't necessarily have to have been in that competition environment, I think. And that's obviously, I'm going to think that because I've not competed, but I don't think you need to have that. Does it affect your progress in being able to referee at a higher level? Absolutely. If we get people that have come in and they've been training for 2 years and they just want to get involved and do a little bit here and a little bit and they want to be a judge and they want to be a referee and things like that. Well, we're not just going to go and say, okay, well, the next Eternal, Lockjaw's fighting for his title at the next Eternal. You go and referee that one, sunshine. Go for your life. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. You're going to have to spend the time, and you're going to have to put in the time to do it. And a lot of the events that you'll be working and a lot of the refereeing that you'll be doing won't be with cameras on, won't be with it won't be in a situation where you're on a UFC Fight Pass or you're on YouTube or you're on whatever it is. You will have to prove that you can do it, and I mean, most of the referees that I work with, we all believe that it's actually harder to referee a C-class amateur fight than what it is to referee a pro fight. But you're going to have to prove yourself in that environment first before you're even going to get an opportunity. So it is what it is. So.
There you go. And say I know you kind of mentioned the the sort of the bigger leagues, the bigger promotions there. When say like the UFC comes to town, which obviously hasn't happened in a little while, but sort of how do you get on a show like that? Like how do they sort of bring referees from overseas, or are they from the local commissions? Like how would you sort of get onto a big show like that?
Most of the when the UFC come, they usually bring their own. Particularly when they come to places like, pretty much anywhere in Australia, because, in Australia, they will predominantly bring a lot of their own guys, and they'll negotiate that with commissions if there is a commission involved in that state. Some of the local guys may get a look in. We've got some bloody good referees in Australia that haven't had the opportunities at the UFC that they should have had. But we've got some really good referees in Australia, off the top of my head, I've worked with John Sharp, and I think John Sharp's an amazing referee. I don't think he's probably had the opportunities that he should have had. And I think he's sort of wound back a little bit now, but I haven't spoken to him for a long, long time either. So, there's and names escape me, so you'll have to forgive me. But there's a couple of good referees over in Perth. I think have had a crack at UFC. There's a couple in Melbourne that have had a crack at UFC. When the UFC come to Queensland don't have a combat sports authority or a governing body or anything like that. So they pretty much bring their own guys and run their show the way they want it and bring their own officials in usually. But if you figure out how to get a better look in, there's a redheaded fella that I work with quite a bit that probably deserves a bit more opportunity at the UFC too. So.
Oh, there you go. Is that is that sort of like a bucket list thing for you or anything? Do you have any sort of goals that you want to get to in the industry, or I don't know, how do you sort of view the landscape?
Yeah, look, ultimately, yeah, it'd be nice if the opportunity was there. Absolutely, take it. I mean, if you got an opportunity to referee at the UFC, you're not going to say, "Nah, sorry guys, I'm happy doing what I'm doing.
I'm busy that weekend."
Of course, yeah, that's it. Yeah, no, sorry, I got to wash my hair. But you're not going to say no. Absolutely, you're not going to say no. Do I think it's an opportunity that, given the current state of play, I suppose, is the best way to describe it, with the way that officials are picked for UFC, particularly when it comes to the Australian sort of events, I probably won't get the opportunity, and that's cool. I don't harbour any sort of burning desire to, like, if I can't get there, it's I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I am hopefully going to get an opportunity to go and referee overseas at some point soon. It's going to be what it's going to be, and I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, and if it happens, it happens.
Right, and how does something like that come about? Like, how do you find yourself sort of refereeing overseas?
Just right place, right time, maybe, hopefully. So, without sort of saying too much, it hasn't sort of come to fruition yet, but there's been some people, there's people that you meet along the way. And obviously when you're meeting different people and you're doing what you do, if the right person sees you at the right time and you make a good impression, well, there might be an opportunity there. So, and that's pretty much how it's played out, but it hasn't happened yet, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Well, until then, you're sort of, stuck refereeing mugs like Lockjaw. So, that's unlucky. But, it sounds like you guys have a pretty good relationship. Like, Lockjaw, have you got any sort of, sort of reflections on Thomas and what it's like to deal with him, and maybe a story or two?
Yeah, I got heaps, but no, yeah, no.
Just remember
well,
just remember my kids want to watch this too. So
exactly, yeah, we gotta stay safe. No, but a lot of people probably don't know, but like, so my very first amateur fight, Thomas actually reffed my first fight, and then obviously, if you watch my last fight, he's reffed my last fight as well. So, and then over the years, he's reffed sort of a few of my fights. And then I've obviously had a few different other referees that, have been officiating my fights, like John Sharp, I think, has done 2 of my fights. Pete's obviously done a fair few of my fights. I think I had Greg Clanans do a few of my fights as well. So, but I think for the most part, I think when I went through the other day, I think Thomas has done pretty much most of my fights, which is kind of cool. So, but yeah, like if you compare it sort of how, for both of us, you look at that, I made my debut on Aftershock in like March of 2014. Thomas reffed me in that fight, and then my most recent fight, Eternal 67 on UFC Fight Pass. Eternal's obviously the biggest promotion in the country. The eyeballs are sort of on, and there's a lot happening. It's kind of a big spectacle in that, and so we've kind of been in the cage on these different sort of promotions as it's gone through the years, and it's kind of, I've managed to sort of get a bunch of wins with Thomas, being the official for my fight. I don't know if there's like a good luck charm there or what's going on, but we'll take it. But I think a good story that I can think of is one time Aftershock ran an event. I think it was in Rocky, or it might have been Rocky or like Gladstone or something like that. I think it was Rocky, and they actually held the event, the cage, and that was set up in a rodeo arena.
Yes.
It was wicked. It was so cool. So we walked out like where the bulls would come out and when they would like get going and that. And then, so we fought in this awesome setup with like the rodeo arena and everything like that. And then afterwards, everybody went out and had copious amounts of alcohol at a Western style bar venue pub thing.
Don't remember that at all.
And it was I barely remember it. I just know that there was a place that
Great Western Hotel.
That's it. That is the one. That is it. I just remember there's a place like that. But yeah, I fought in a rodeo arena. It was pretty cool. Fought a guy named Jai Ruane at the time. He was, bit of a weapon. Jai. Yeah. Yep. I think he kicked the shit out of me for 2 rounds, and then eventually I was able to take him down, start controlling him a bit. But So obviously, for my thing, I've had the privilege of sort of going through my MMA journey and then having sort of interactions with Thomas over that time period, from when I was an amateur, like my very first fight, to when I became a pro, to being now sort of, I guess, in the sort of upper end of the sort of division that I'm in, and the experience level that I'm at now, and kind of we've just kind of kept the sort of, both of us have sort of just kept going and pursuing the thing that we're pursuing, and sort of just doing it because we're passionate about it. And it's kind of cool, because it's like, I'm in there competing and fighting. He's in there doing, like you said, everything from the officiating to the timekeeping to being backstage, helping with the judging, doing all that sort of stuff. So, it's stuff like that's kind of cool when you're showing up to these events on a grassroots level. And that's something I'm going to miss when I like take that next step and fight overseas and fight on some of these bigger promotions, is like, you're going to build that relationship with new people and stuff like that. But, that's something I'm going to miss, knowing that I'm going to rock up to an event and I'm going to see people like Thomas there, and I'm going to know, like, we're on the same page. I don't need to worry about anything. As a fighter, I feel like I'm in safe hands. I have someone who's involved in any capacity, that's sort of experienced. He knows what to expect from me. I know what to expect from him. And, it all kind of just flows naturally and kind of clicks together. So, that sort of makes it really easy, because I think that's something people don't really think about. You get in there and compete, and people watch these shows that we're sort of fighting on, and like for example, Thomas has reffed a bunch of my fights. That kind of gives me the comfort in knowing that he knows he's going to have a really good idea of like where I'm at in a fight or what's happening. But at the same time, I know what to expect, and I'm not going to like fuck around and do something I'm not supposed to do. Or I know where his sort of line is in the sand, if you can say that, with what he expects and what he doesn't want to see. So, I think it makes both of our jobs easier when you have that sort of foundation, I guess, going forward in the sport.
And it's one of the things that you sort of touched on there, I suppose, like you know, from back when you debuted and things like that. Like you get involved in this sport now, the people and the amateur stuff that you start to officiate and referee and things like that, they're the people that I suppose you levitate towards naturally. You know, like you talk to someone, I remember one of the first fight shows I did, it was a fella by the name of Matt Eland. And I think you trained with Matt for a little while, didn't you, Justin?
I did. When I first started in Mackay, he was one of my teammates in Mackay.
That's right. Yeah. So the very first event that I did was an aftershock MMA down at the old Hammer Arena at Bowen Hills, and Matt was fighting his first fight. The guy that was wrapping his hands had no idea what he was doing, and when he'd wrapped his hands, his thumb, like he went to make a fist and he couldn't actually make a fist. They wrapped his thumb so tight that he couldn't actually make a fist. So he had to go and obviously do it again. But then, you know, you see Matt and Matt sort of progressed through to a certain point and he's off doing other stuff there now. But I mean, some of those early events that I was doing, you saw people like Arlene Blanco, Jessie Jess, Megan Anderson. There was Shannon Ross, you know, all of those sort of guys and girls that were there at that early stage in their career. You get involved now, that's the people that you're going to be meeting, introducing yourself, levitating towards too. And you're going to be talking to those people for a long time. You know, there's still times where you get messages from people that you've refereed, you know, 5-6 years ago, and they've gone on to bigger and better things. And you sort of go, well, that's pretty cool that they actually remember you, or they'll come and seek you out at a show and they go, oh yeah, no, I remember you. So it's a pretty cool environment and a pretty cool sport to be in. You know, like, yes, there are egos involved, but when you get around and you're talking to people on a personal level, it's a pretty cool thing to be a part of. So.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I'm glad you mentioned Shannon Ross there. Actually, we're going to talk about Shannon because obviously, for those who don't know, he was on Dana White's Contender Series last week. You know, he did lose his fight. It was an absolute war. You know, there was some sort of talk that the UFC might sign him to a contract or might not, but it didn't look like it was going to happen. But it's come out that he actually fought the fight with appendicitis, and he's had his appendix out in the days following the fight, and you know, he's woken up from his operation to find that he's been awarded a UFC contract. So you know, it's great news for Shannon Ross to see him heading into the UFC. So have you reffed Shannon before? I think you mentioned there, Thomas.
Look, I don't remember reffing him. I know I've judged a fair few of his fights, and I know I refereed him doing like some grappling stuff and things like that. But I don't actually ever remember refereeing one of his fights, which is killing me, because I reckon I have, but I just can't remember who it would have been against and where and things like that. So I know I cornered against him when one of my old teammates, Matt George, fought him, but that didn't go very well for poor old Matty. But yeah, it's such a good result for Shannon. Like, he's one of the hardest working guys you'll ever meet, and he's always one of those guys that's just friendly and approachable and happy to have a yarn, and it just seems like a really genuine guy, you know. Or the experiences I've always had with him have always been genuine and positive. So, you know, for him to finally get that jump that he's been wanting for so long is just so, I'm just so happy for the guy.
Yeah, it's great news. What do you make of it all, Lockjaw? What do you make of Shannon Ross's UFC contract and his his chances in the flyweight division over there?
Yeah, that's crazy. Like we kind of spoke about, I guess, I mean, and this isn't a knock on Shannon, but I think we spoke about it, like, after watching the fight, we were kind of like, you know, it seemed like something was a bit weird. You know, he like spoke about, he seemed a bit slow in there, or it seemed like there was something that was kind of like not good. And, you know, you and I were both kind of like, well, man, that's pretty unfortunate, because, like, we want to see him do well. We want to see him get another shot, but, you know, something looked a bit off. But now you find out that the guy had appendicitis, you know, and was fighting in there with like a ruptured appendix. It's fucking makes it even crazier, and he deserves to be there. He deserves to have that contract. And like Thomas sort of touched on, man, he's a really nice guy, and we want to see people like that just continue to do well. He's a family man, you know. He's a dad. He's out here just grinding, working hard in any possible way you can. I think you even touched on that when you interviewed him. Like he was driving home, from training when you sort of were chatting to him at like 9:30 at night after he'd worked all day, then went and trained, and it's kind of like he's just one of those people that just kept working, and now he's got that opportunity, and he can get after it on the sort of big stage, make some money for his family, and kind of just take every sort of reward that's coming his way. And I'm super stoked for him. Every time I've dealt with Shannon, trained with him, and been around him, he's been just a genuinely nice guy. And I think we fought together. I imagine we fought together on a few shows. And I've gotten to see him to sort of just beat the shit out of people on a local level, have some fights, have the fights on UAE Warriors, come back. Now he's gotten this opportunity. He's fought on Contender Series, gotten a contract out of it, regardless of the fight. Because like we said, it was a crazy fight. Like they were just scrapping, and he was just sort of digging deep and just kept coming and didn't stop. So yeah, that's what we want to see. We want to see more and more people from the sort of the region get their opportunities, because it's going to rise everyone up, and that's what you want. We want to see it continue to sort of go like that.
Absolutely, and at 33 years old, he's been there and done that, and it's it's reward for effort, and obviously it was a huge effort on the day at Dana White's Contender Series as well. So great news. I think everyone's just really happy. Like like you say, I interviewed Shannon Ross earlier this year when he signed for the Contender Series, and it was a pleasure to deal with. Really nice guy. So we like to see, and we're daggy old dads here. We all like you say, we always root for a family man here. So we love seeing another dad sort of getting after it and making moves. So well done to Shannon Ross.
Absolutely.
Now, another guy in action last week was Rob Wilkinson. He had his PFL semi-final. Obviously, we previewed this one last week. He took on Dylan Monte and put him away in the first round. Now Lockjaw's pretty much gone 3 for 3 on predictions with Rob Wilkinson. Pretty much all 3 of Rob Wilkinson's PFL fights have been predicted to be one-sided ass whoopings, and such so it has proven. So he takes on Amari Akhmedov at PFL 10 on November 25th in the final for $1 million on the line. So what do you make of Rob Wilkinson's performance and his chances in the final?
He's going to bash this guy. He's going to put him to sleep. He's going to knock him the fuck out in the first round. He's going to make $1 million. He's going to get a world title. And then all I want, Rob, when you do that, is take me out for pizza when you win that $1 million. And then, then we can... That's it. That's all I want.
Yeah, he doesn't ask much. Have you dealt with Rob Wilkinson at all, Thomas? Have you come across him in the scene?
I've met Rob a couple of times when I have been lucky enough to get flown down to Tassie to referee a couple of times. So but I have met Rob a couple of times, and it has got me absolutely screwed how that guy ever used to make 84 kilos. Yeah. How the hell he made middleweight? And I'm 6'4" and 105 kilos. And that guy makes me look like a midget. So it had me screwed how he ever made 84 kilos. But didn't have a lot to do with him. He was sort of cornering people at the time, or mingling with the crowd and things like that. But made all power to the guy. He's he looks good at light heavyweight, doesn't he?
He looks like the Incredible Hulk. We've talked about this before on the podcast. He looks unbelievable. And funny you mentioned the weight cut to middleweight. I think we've possibly talked about this on the podcast before as well. I've interviewed Rob maybe 2 or 3 times over the last couple of years, and he mentioned that he used to cut, I think, something like 13 or 14 kilos to get down to middleweight, which is insane. So he said he was just so compromised, sort of getting down to middleweight. So it makes sense. And like you say, now he's at light heavyweight. It's just unbelievable to think that he ever fought as a middleweight. But he looks unbelievable. Yeah,
he's a monster. I can't wait to see him win this last fight and get what he deserves.
And not only is he out here just whooping ass at light heavyweight, in PFL, and he's just gone from strength to strength to strength. He's doing it at a handicap. The guy has to have Chris Drummond around him 24/7 in fight week. Like, I can't think of anything worse.
Come on,
Chris is awesome, and he's a scary individual. Obviously, Thomas has gone to Tassie, and like you said, and refed on a bunch of shows down there. And Chris is a frequent person that gets into the cage when there are shows in Tassie, and even when there aren't. And that guy's, another person that's just an absolute monster of a man.
Mate, I thought I was going to get lynched in Tassie one night. The night that Chris Drummond fought Jai Bradney. And this is a while ago now, obviously. I think it was actually a Valor when they were still around. But Chris Drummond has picked Jai Bradney up, run him across the cage, and he's put a Jai Bradney-sized dent of the back of his head in the cage as he's gone to take him down. He's put him on the ground, but he's ended up hitting him probably about 7 or 8 times in the back of the head. He was going for the ear, and Jai kept moving. I kept telling him, you got to change your angles. He didn't change his angles, unfortunately. So I ended up calling it a no contest. And I'll tell you what, I did not think they were going to let me out of there. I thought they were going to be waiting for me at the airport the following day because they were not happy. They were not happy. The crowd was not happy. So,
God, there you go. You live to tell the tale. So, yeah.
And they invited me back.
Oh, there you go. Can't have been that bad then. But
No,
did those sorts of things play on your mind when you're refereeing? If you got the hometown boy, you got sort of a raucous crowd and that sort of thing. Does it ever sort of play into your mind, or are you kind of in the zone and not really kind of thinking about all the sort of outside factors?
You really don't hear much. The only thing that you're listening for in there is the 10-second clacker and the horn. Obviously, if you hear the crowd getting a little bit wild, you sort of got to, there have been times where I've had to position myself so I can see the 10-second clacker because you just cannot hear it. But no, it doesn't really play on your mind. More so, what you more so hear in there, and depending on which coaches it is, but more so you'll actually hear the coach yelling instructions more so than what you hear the crowd. That's what I hear most often. So, and if it's a bit of a slow fight, then you'll hear the commentators. So.
Yeah, that'd be kind of interesting.
Well, Thomas has seen, some like obviously, like you said, you're going to deal with people and see some coaches who get really into it and get amped up. My old coach Paul Stoy used to slap the shit out of me in between rounds. That's always entertaining.
I'm sure there's times he wanted to do that to me too, but no. Paul and all the referees, Pasha's he's got a great respect and a great relationship with all the referees, and he will voice his opinion at times during the heat of the moment. But as soon as you go backstage, he gives you a hug, and it's like, I'm sorry, man, I shouldn't have said that. So yeah, no, I really like when Pash has got students at an event because he makes it interesting. He makes it fun.
That's good. Yeah, I guess it is it's a high pressure environment, isn't it? So people sort of say things, Lockjaw's, been known to sort of fly off the handle immediately after the referee stoppage. So
don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I got launched. I got sent away.
It wasn't that far. It wasn't that far.
See, I don't know if people know, but Thomas can shift some weight around. So when he grabbed me, it was like nothing to him to just throw me clear across the cage. But you got to do that as a ref. You got to be on your toes. That's the only thing. That's something I want to sort of ask you. Like, how do you sort of dictate where to move to and when not to move to as your refereeing? Because I can't think my job's simple. I just got to worry about the dude in front of me, but you got to worry about where we're going, what we're doing. Plus, like you said, you're listening out for the horn or the clacker and all that sort of stuff. Like, how do you sort of dictate that side of things? Because I look at that and I go, I'm for sure tripping over the fighters. I'm getting head kicked by someone who's going to be standing in the wrong spot.
Yeah. No, it's experience comes into it, but you always try and go to where you can see the most weapons, I suppose, is probably the easiest way to describe it. You don't want to be you don't want to be with your back on the cage as people are coming towards you. So that's, we obviously want to try and be on what they class as the open side of the cage.
Yeah.
And you want to try and see as many weapons as you can. So you'll notice, and all referees will do this. Like when there's a clinch on the cage, if you're not going to stand to the side where you can see the fighters' backs. You're going to stand around to the front side so you can see the knees getting thrown and things like that. From a grappling standpoint, it's the same thing. You want to you'll look at where. So in a grappling exchange, if it's if the fighter on the bottom's got his view obstructed or you can't see much of what's going on there, well, you just try and find the spot that you can see if there's strikes being landed, where they're going to. If there's a possibility of a submission, well, what can you use to tap out with? Can you see that with, as well as seeing his eyes if he's in a choke? You're rattling through a number of different things in your head at the same time and just sort of putting yourself in the best position to see as much of the action as you possibly can while it's going on.
There you go, and we've got a couple of questions for you as well. Actually, we've had some questions put to us. We take a question from a fan every week, as you know, and a couple that have come up recently is one's open scoring. Actually, as someone who's sort of involved in in officiating in all different capacities, open scoring is one that gets debated a lot. It's one that we've been asked about recently as well. Do you feel there's any merit to sort of introducing open scoring, or do you think it should be sort of kept until after the fight?
Yeah, there's fors and againsts for it. Obviously, if from a competitor's point of view, if you're down, if there's two close rounds, and you find that you're down those two close rounds, you've been scored against, on the negative end of those two rounds, you're going to want to know before you go into the third round. On the flip side, if you're winning the fight, if you've won those two close rounds, you probably don't want to know. I don't know. Like it's hard for me to say that from a competitor's viewpoint, but from an official's viewpoint, I think the only thing that would do from an official's viewpoint, and again, not everybody's going to agree with this, the only thing that would do would be put the spectators in a more negative position towards it. It'd open the judges up for issues with spectators at the events. Some events would be worse than others. There's some events that you do have issues with, but with spectators and stuff like that, depending on the venue. But that's kind of, I'd like to see it trialled. Whether I think it'll work or not, I don't think it'll work, to be honest with you. I think it'll take the coach's mentality away from, if a coach thinks that, you're up 2 rounds and then all of a sudden they see that you're down 2 rounds, well, they're not going to be thinking about or potentially not going to be thinking about what they need to instruct their fighter to do. They're going to be worrying more so about why the judges have done what they've done. So, that's just, and I think the people that I've spoken to involved in the officiating side of things all say very similar things. But I know that there are people out there that, want to push for open scoring. And from an accountability standpoint, I have no problems with telling anybody who's got their faculties about them and is actually involved with the fight or the fighter. I have no issues in discussing my scorecards and or having them know my name or who I am or anything like that. But you don't want to have punters with, beer cans and things like that, where you can't actually turn around and see what's going on behind you. So it's Yeah,
it's true. It's a fair call. I don't mind the suspense either. Like, when you get to the end of the fight and they sort of announce the scores and you've sort of, been guessing all the way along who's winning or who's not. But it's a fair point. You don't really want to sort of have it published in real time when there's a particularly raucous crowd there. But another one that's been put to us is referee stand-ups. I think we might have even talked about this on last week's episode. some people have been complaining that at a UFC card last week there was a lot of stand-ups, and there's some sort of conjecture about whether they were warranted or whatnot. So I just wanted to sort of put it to you, like, what's the criteria for you to sort of stand up fighters when they're on the ground?
Yeah, that's a hard question because it does vary as well. I mean, if you're in a situation where someone gets taken down, they manage to get guard on the way down, and they're holding on, and there's not much activity from the person on top to try and pass guard or to try and work or things like that. Well, obviously you're going to give them a shorter time span to do something or to be stood up. And in that instance, you're going to give them some warnings, I suppose, instructions, whatever you want to call it, and it's simply a case of you've got to work while you're on top, need more action, things like that. If that fighter takes them down and puts them into side control, or they end up in a mount or on the back or things like that, well, they're obviously going to have a lot more leeway to work, because you've not just taken somebody down, you've got a pretty dominant position. You want to reward that. You can't take that position away as quickly as you can if they're in a guard or something like that. Like I can't ever remember a time where I've stood anybody up from side control or mount or something like that. It's just not. It's not the done thing as far as I'm concerned. You don't want to. It's bloody hard work to get someone on the ground and get into side control or get into mount or get on their back. It's not easy. So you don't want to take that position away from them for no real reason or without any warning. Or I think that event you were talking about, there was a couple there that I haven't actually watched it. I'd been spoken to about it a couple of times, but I hadn't actually watched it. And once someone said to me that there was one, a takedown, and then 15 seconds later they were standing them back up or something like that. I think that's probably a little bit quick if that's accurate, but it depends on the circumstances too. So.
Yeah, there you go. And I guess with stoppages like TKOs as well, that's another one. Obviously, we saw the Derek Lewis stoppage. It might have even been on the same card, perhaps. It was, he sort of got dropped pretty hard, and he popped straight back up. But is there sort of a criteria? Is there sort of something that you're looking for when someone goes down to stop it, or sort of how are you kind of instructed on that?
Criteria, no, because if you're going to set a criteria for it and then you're going to try and sit there and remember the criteria, if that criteria has got 5 different steps, mate, the guy could be permanently injured by the time you run through that in your head. You've literally got a split second to make a decision. And that's another one. Like I didn't watch that either. I didn't see that one either. I haven't even seen a highlight of it, to be honest with you. But from what I've been told, when he copped the shot, he fell forwards. Yeah. Did he brace himself with his hands or anything, or did he just fall?
He kind of headbutted the floor and then popped up.
Well, I'm probably stopping the fight.
Yeah.
Because to me, like if you've got your wits about you, you've been cracked. If you've got your wits about you in any way, shape, or form, you're going to put your hands up to brace your fall, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're not going to fall and brace your fall with your forehead. And that's a long way for someone like Derek. Like Derek Lewis is probably my height. He's like 6'3", 6'4". That's a big bit of timber to fall down. So by the time that referee's made his decision to stop the fight, it's done. If you're falling down like that, then I'd probably be stopping the fight too.
Yeah, I've heard that sort of mentioned that the sort of the main criteria. I can't even remember who said this to me. Actually, it was a long time ago, but I remember someone mentioning that the criteria for stopping a fight. Well, not the criteria, but one of the main sort of things that a referee looks for is when the arms go limp, and I think that's kind of what you described there. Is if they're getting sort of even beaten up on the ground, once the arms sort of go and they can't sort of defend themselves, and that's kind of when the referee is sort of supposed to step in. Does that sound kind of accurate?
Well, that's one thing you'll look for. You'll even look for the eyes. Like there's been times, particularly in amateur fights, where someone's on the ground, they're getting ground and pounded, and it's not looking like it's doing a heck of a lot of damage, so to speak. But the fighter's actually looking at you and then looking back, and you can see like there's a different look in the eyes when someone has had enough and they don't know what to do and they don't know how to get out. And you'll see that a lot in the amateurs. You don't see that a lot in the pros. There was a fight I refereed on Eternal, and for the life of me, and I really feel bad about this, I can't remember the young fella that got TKO'd, but it was Tom Nolan versus someone. And I really feel bad about that because really nice young guy.
The recent Eternal?
Yeah.
The recent Eternal, yeah.
Neem Stevens?
Yes, that's him. That's him. Yeah, really nice young guy. And Tom was on top, and there was a lot of strikes being thrown. And I actually remember watching the replay back, and about 2 seconds before I actually stopped it, you could hear Kyle Noakes say the referee needs to look at stopping this. And what actually made me stop it, or what made me leave it go the way it was that Neem was defending. Like he was moving, he was adjusting, he was trying to get his head out of the way of the shots. He was moving his hips. His shoulders weren't flat on the back of the cage, on the back of the floor. He was trying to adjust. His arms were moving, trying to fish for an underhook or something. He was actively trying to do something, even though some of those shots were landing. The reason I chose to stop it, there was one that got through, and he rolled back, popped back up, and Tom hit him once more as I was moving in. But it was that motion that he rolled himself back, like his body, he's almost like his body went limp, and then came straight back too. But by then, that's enough. You can't intelligently defend yourself when you're in that situation. So, the biggest thing is you've got to be able to identify intelligent defense. And even sometimes intelligent defense, if you can't get out, you just got to. Crucifix positions are a big example of that. If someone gets stuck in a crucifix and they can't get out, and you're just getting peppered with, little shots that don't necessarily put you out or put a fighter out, you've still got to look at the fighter's safety and whether they've got an opportunity to get out. And
Absolutely. Well, actually, speaking of identifying intelligence, that probably leads us right into our fan question for this week. The question comes from Tyson Fergus of Sydney, so thank you, Tyson, for listening. But his question is, what are your thoughts on Urban Fight Night's TikTok show? Now, I don't know that there's going to be a whole lot of intelligent defence to be identified there, but I don't know. What do you make of all that, Thomas?
I
haven't seen it.
So
they're doing Sorry, I'll let Lockjaw break it down for you. Actually,
they're doing like I think they're doing like an Urban Fight Night event, and they're gonna have like actual. So they're still gonna have like the actual amateur fights and I think 1 or 2 pro fights with like people who actually train and do stuff like that. But then aside from that, they're doing like a bunch of like MMA and boxing fights with people who pretty much just make videos on TikTok and then have done like 2 weeks of training now, and then they're gonna like get in there and fight and compete and do stuff like that. So. That's like a thing that they're doing. And yeah, it's a weird situation. So like, obviously like we sort of spoke about, you got to guys, people are going to compete in the sport and do stuff. The referee's got his responsibilities and his understanding of how things need to be. The fighters need to have that as well. But like when you're in a situation like this where you have a couple of clowns that make TikTok videos that are going to get in there and compete, like cool, all power to them. They're getting in there and doing something and putting themselves on the line here and that and stepping inside a cage in some way. But like, are we going to see a bunch of people just get like seriously injured because they don't have...
I guess it's possible. But you see, I don't know. Not knowing how much training they've had, I'd probably hope they've had a little bit more than 2 weeks. But
it's like a couple of weeks. Yeah, I haven't. Yeah,
okay. Yeah,
I don't have faith.
Yeah, okay. Not knowing the full sort of realm of the competition, I suppose. Like there's been some of those type of things that you see a lot of TV hosts and radio hosts and things like that have been a part of that probably haven't had much more training either. So hard to say. I'd like to think that they've had more than 2 weeks training. There's a couple of really good programs. One I haven't seen for a while in Queensland is the Wimp to Warrior program, but I think they might get 3 or 4 months training.
Yeah, so
before they actually put them in. But yeah, I'm not sure. If it's 2 weeks training, I'd be a little bit worried.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, so that, what you're sort of speaking about with Victoria and that they've rebranded now and they're doing like, it's called Alta now. And they've rebranded and they've done their whole thing. Obviously we're part of that. We're running it out of freestyle at the moment as well. So it's 20 weeks that they're training for. Yeah. And then it's optional for these people to have a fight at the end of it. But like, 20 weeks, that's a decent time frame. And, with how they run it, they do 3 2-minute rounds. They got shin pads, all that sort of stuff. Shin pads, the bigger gloves.
Heavily modified rules.
Yeah. It's, it's good. It's a bit different. But even then, 20 weeks of training is a lot better than, I don't know, maybe 3-4 weeks, maybe a month. And then, you're fighting on Urban. And, I'll say it like it is. Urban's not necessarily the most professionally run show and things don't always go smoothly there. So from my point of view, it seems a bit weird that they're doing this. Like I can understand from a marketing point of view and a business point of view, you're kind of branching out and you're relying on the fact that these people have a big social media following and you're going to sell some tickets and make some money. But man, I just don't want to see anyone get their head punched in that doesn't need to.
Yeah. That's obviously a concern. Whenever you got anything like that going on. Yeah. I can't speak on Urban. I've never worked for them, never dealt with the actual promotion itself. But
keep it that way.
I've no, well, I'm not registered with CSA, so I can't. but I do know the Mokhtarian brothers there, so they're pretty enterprising sort of blokes. So I mean,
they know how to market things. They know how to market things.
They know how to make a dollar. So that's yeah, if it works and no one gets hurt, I suppose, all power to them, but hopefully no one gets hurt.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, like Lockjaw touched on there, you can sort of see what they're trying to do. They're obviously tapping into the followings of these influencers and that sort of thing. But I don't know, is there room for this sort of stuff on the local scene? Like, I don't know, what do you sort of what do you feel about it all?
Oh, look, I'd rather see it done properly. Obviously, that's whether my version of properly is the right version or not is not for me to say. But I'd much rather people have a bit more experience and a bit more training and a bit more time to understand what's going on. The amount of times that I've gone into an amateur fight night and you're sort of doing the rules meeting and you ask the question, who's first time fighters, and 3 or 4 people put their hands up and you go, right, you do realize you're about to get punched in the face really hard. And their whole facial expression just changes. Like it's like, oh, holy shit, this is real. I don't know if you can get that with limited training and limited, no matter what your background or how many street fights you've had or, whatever, we've all had guys like that come into the gym where they've had like 100 street fights and things like that. It's a completely different thing. And that's why I chose to never put my hand up to do it. So, I don't necessarily say that it doesn't have a place, but it has to be done properly and it has to be done safely for it to have a place.
And what would the answer be if the phone rings, it's the Mokhtarian brothers, and they're like, Thomas, we need you to sort of preside over these TikTok fights. How would you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm not registered in the CSA, mate. I can't. Combat Sports Authority. Combat Sports Authority, decline. I can't. Yeah, I would probably politely decline, yeah.
There you go. Well, hopefully you don't politely decline on episode 26 of Fight Talk Down Under. Obviously, we'll be coming back next week to preview Eternal 68. I've got Tyson Pedro's back in action. Obviously, we'll have lots more fun and frivolity, of course. But until then, send us through your fan questions. Details will be sort of below-ish if you're If you're watching on YouTube, if not, it's at Dan Meehan MMA on Twitter or at Lockjaw MMA on Insta. Make sure you give us a follow on Insta as well at Fight Talk Down Under, and also like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Fight News Australia, and iHeartRadio. For me, I've got a couple of interviews coming out this week. One's just dropped tonight with Jacinta Austin, who's fighting at Eternal 68. I also interviewed Deandra Martin last week, who's on One Championship, their big one on Prime card in, I think, about 3 weeks' time. So keep your eyes peeled for that one this week. They'll be on Fight News Australia YouTube, of course. Thomas, you got anything coming up? Anything you want to leave us off with?
Mate, not off the top of my head. Obviously, just anyone who is interested in joining the ranks of officials, jump onto the IMAF Australia Facebook page and register your interest there. Hit up your local promotion. I know that there's been a couple of the local promotions around Southeast Queensland that have been putting some names forward for that. So by all means, the more the merrier. Come on board and see what it's all about. And who knows, you might just end up spending the next 12 years travelling around, driving up and down everywhere, refereeing fights and having a ball, meeting people like Lockjaw.
And being schooled by the great Tomas Churchill.
I don't know about that.
All right, then Lockjaw, what do you got to take us off with? We've always got to wrap us up.
Oh yeah, no, I'm like I said, I'm stoked that we're going from strength to strength. We're 25 episodes in. We're going to keep going. We're going to slow down anytime soon, but it gives me a great sort of comfort and peace of mind knowing that there's people like Thomas out here reffing fights, and who knows, he might be reffing my next one when I fight for that featherweight title, and I know he's going to be able to tell when Jack Jenkins is having a nice little nap and he can pull me off him and I can take that belt.
I gotta watch it, you never know what might stop you.